Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the discussion on post-structuralism. Today, we shall be talking about the contribution of Roland Barthes in the development of post-structuralism. Roland Barthes, 1915 to 1980, was a French literary theorist, essayist, philosopher, critic, and semiotician. His work engaged in the analysis of a variety of science systems, mainly derived from the Western popular culture. Especially Roland Barthes' post writings or later writings began to make the first moves in rebelling against structuralist reading of the text. Actually, he began as a structuralist but later evolved as a post structuralist because he started questioning the very elements of structuralism. Barthes began by suggesting a different view of the text. He argued that texts can be either readerly or writerly. Readerly in inverted commas, writerly in inverted commas. A readerly text was one that left the reader with nothing to do. It explained, explicated, described everything. It controlled meaning, and the reader was a mere passive recipient of meaning. Whereas a writerly text, on the other hand, was one where the reader had an active role to play. The text teased, hid, offered clues to the reader to decode from it. It controlled meaning, and the reader was a mere passive, was not a mere passive recipient. On the contrary, he has become very active. In other words, Barthes was proposing that meaning was not embedded within the text, but within the reader, who derived meaning from the textual process. As he puts it, in The Death of the Author, I quote, "The reader is the space on which all the quotations that make up a writing are inscribed without any of them being lost. A text's unity lies not in its origin, but in its destination, that is, with the reader." Do you understand? So it's the reader that is more important. As Barthes puts it, he suggested that a work is a physical object that occupies shelf place and is carried in the hand. So, a text, on the other hand, is a process within the language. Text here begins to mean a series of linguistic processes that are decoded by the reader and assume the structure of narrative negotiations between the language and the reader, the language of the text and the reader. As Barthes puts it, from his text called From Work to Text, this is the title of his text, From Work to Text, I quote, "The text is experienced only as an activity of production," unquote. In addition, Barthes sees the author as the controlling authority that prevents a work from becoming a text. As long as we assume that the author carries its meaning and owns the meaning of the poem or the novel, it will remain a work of art and will not become a text. Barthes writes, again I quote, "The explanation of a work is always sought in the man or woman who produced it, as if it were always in the end, through the more or less transparent allegory of the fiction, the voice of a single person, the author confiding in us." I unquote. And so the Barthes' very famous line comes, "A work becomes a text then when the reader refuses authorial authority." In Barthes' famous formulation, the birth of the reader must be at the cost of the death of the author. That's very, very famous line of Roland Barthes. I repeat, the birth of the reader must be at the cost of the death of the author. Only then a work of art becomes the text, and the meaning is produced by the reader by interpreting this text. Barthes then proposed that these negotiations are by definition endless, so you can have multiplicity of meanings. This is so because every text is open, an endless series of signifiers that refer to the other signifiers and other texts rather than point to any definite conclusive meaning. The reader's task and pleasure is in playing with the text's endless games of signification. Do you understand? Barthes further proposed that this play is not necessarily controlled by the author. On the contrary, it is the reader who plays with it and produces the meaning within it. The author center as authority, as the controller of meaning, is dead, and the meaning of a text lies somewhere in the play between the narrative and the reader. Never the author is there in the picture. The play and its pleasure arise from the fact that every text is plural in its meaning. It refers to, echoes, parallels, quarrels with, reflects, and borrows from other texts. Play is not rational or hierarchic, but random, repeatable, differently, and endless. Because if we look at Barthes, he definitely says that the text is plural, the text is open to other texts in an endless series of intertextual operations. What Barthes terms a tissue of quotations drawn from innumerable centers of culture. The author is dead, and so is therefore no more the sole authority over the text's meaning. The pleasures of a text lie in the process of playing the narrative by the reader. With these moves, Barthes has put in place a different view of textuality itself, arguing for an openness and endlessness of meaning, making the narrative a different process as such. Thus, we understand Roland Barthes and his death of the author, which is an important contribution to the structuralism, leading to the post-structuralism as well. Thus, Roland Barthes is an important exponent of post-structuralism. Thank you for being a part of this. Bye for now.